I'd like everybody to stand for a moment of silence in the pledge. Pledge. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First item on the agenda tonight is the adoption of the agenda. Is there a motion to accept the agenda as is?
I'll make that motion.
Mr. Peridot, second.
I'll second
All right, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
I'm on the board.
Yeah, congratulations.
Next item is public comments. Alicia, is there anybody signed up?
No.
All right, thank you. Next item is the selection of a board chair for 2017. So at this time, I'll open the floor up for nominations for board chair.
Okay, but wait, before you do that, we go through this every year. Does it take a motion and a second, or just a motion?
No second is required.
Okay, thank you. I know we always have this conversation.
Second is or is not required?
It's
No, it's
not required for nomination.
Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I nominate Dr. Kudak for chair.
Dr. Kudak, the nominator. Are there any other nominations?
I'd like to nominate Mr. Heisel.
Heisel. Are there any other nominations? Okay. This time with the two nominations, I guess we'll call for a vote. Dr. Kudak was the first nominee, so I'll ask all those in favor of Dr. Kudak to, if you don't care, raise your hand so I can get a count. What do you think? All those opposed? All right, then that takes care of that. That's that. This time I'll turn it over to Dr. Kudak.
Okay, all right, next up is selection of board vice chair for 2017. The floor is open for nominations.
Not everybody jump at once. It's really not that bad, I promise.
I'll nominate Mr. Peridot. I said that I'm not interested.
Okay. Well,
Well, I'll nominate myself
Okay.
is that, okay. Okay, so you
That
nominate
goes.
yourself?
Do that.
Sorry, I mean, I can nominate you, Scott, if that makes it better, rather than you having to nominate yourself.
That's okay.
All right. Any other nominations?
I'm really happy to hand it over.
I move the nominations closed.
All right, motion to accept nominations closed. We need a second and a vote on that, right?
When we vote.
Okay.
Yes, we get a second to close nominations.
Okay. All right, so second on closing nominations.
I'll make that.
Motion by Ms. Hicks, second by Ms. Carter to close nominations. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Congratulations, Mr. Heisel. You're the vice chair.
Enjoy.
Puts me in charge of policy. Puts me in charge of policy.
Put you in charge of the room, it's not paperwork. But Dr. Kudak is not available.
I didn't tell you I'm leaving next week. It's all yours now.
I don't think it's a meeting next week.
It doesn't, you gotta go when they call. Such as Paul called me in the middle of my hair sticking straight up because Dr. Kudak went out of town and didn't tell me that I was meeting all the bank presidents. And I went in sweatpants and I thought I was meeting Paul. So congratulations.
Thank you.
That's okay. You signed off on some sales we had for a long time. So that's-
Yeah, but he didn't warn me about that one.
All right, item number 4 is appointing the board secretary. Traditionally, Mr. Christie, the superintendent, is board secretary. So I'll entertain a motion to make Mr. Christie the board secretary for 2017.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Ms. Ritchie,
Second.
second by Ms. Hicks. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Let's see, item number 5, consider approval of Alicia Ellis as treasurer of Clark County Public Schools and board treasurer. Traditionally, the finance director is the treasurer and executes all of our financial documents. So I would consider a motion to make Alicia Ellis treasurer of Clark County Public Schools and board treasurer.
I'll make that nomination.
Let's see. Motion by Scott Heisel,
Second.
second by Judy Hicks. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Next up, establishing the sequence of voting. Let's see, item number 6 on the PDF. And basically says a majority of the board has to be here for a transaction of business. That means we need 3 people here to be able to do anything. If there's only 3 people at the meeting to do recusals or anything else, anything that's passed has to be unanimous. So all votes are by voice or hand raise or some sort of physical gesture. Written votes are not allowed. And we observe Robert's Rules of Order when voting. So our board policy says that voting sequence is set by the presiding officer. That came up because there was a motion that happened last fall, which not only stipulated some things, but also stipulated the voting sequence. And our board attorney at the time was wondering about that, did a little bit of legal review, and it violated our policy. I'm not sure whether it actually violates state law or not. So
Are we in a discussion period or not?
we can be.
Okay. I was a little confused about that because I'd seen a document somewhere that said that when a roll call vote is asked for, that it is in the district court.
That's kind of the traditional, so. You know, I think if it's a controversial subject, and, you know, my thinking on that is if, you know, voting in numerical order gives one side an advantage or disadvantage, or perceived advantage or disadvantage, and I think that's differently. But, so, that's kind of the traditional route, so.
Is anyone else aware of what that document is that specifies that it should be by district order?
I'm not sure, it's not, 160.270 is cited in the item, but that's not what the law states. There's part of the law that basically says it doesn't have anything to do with school law, it just has to do with voting as a public body. And it's basically, it's a voice vote or physical vote. So acceptable methods, if you're an elected official, of voting are voice vote, hand vote, electronic device. So written votes that each person would write and then hand something in that would not be, and an open meeting would not be considered valid. So
Yeah, it has to be a method that shows how
Right.
publicly, how each.
the theory is
person-
because you're elected, you're responsible for your vote, you have to be accountable for your vote. So.
In last year's meeting, there was some, the minutes say that the board members acknowledged by general consent to lead the sequence of voting at the board's shared discussion. But before that, it stated that voting in the past has been given by voice vote or roll call vote. When the roll call votes are used, voting order is by the school board member district order. So that was that was in the discussion last year. I'm not sure if there's any citation of the district order, but your position on it is going to be that it won't be strictly by district order. It'll be whatever you think is appropriate at that
Right,
time.
right. And I will say in general, simultaneous vote works the best, to be honest with you, ayes and nays. So I mean, we handle 98% of our business like that.
Roll call is the specific question, how that's ordered.
But like, at one point, didn't Todd request roll call by district order or something, or can't
Right.
you request to do it, any board member can request?
You can request a roll call vote, anybody can request that for any motion, but how the roll call vote's done is up to the chair. So,
And sometimes, I think in a training session that I had concerning voting early in my board service, the facilitator noted that often members feel a little more comfortable explaining their vote if it's a roll call vote. You know, that you vote and then explain. And sometimes in a voice vote that's simultaneous, you know, some people may not feel comfortable, I want to explain my vote. And when you are called on individually, it's like, before I vote, I would like to say, and then I vote, or I vote, and then say, I would like to explain.
I think we usually do, but I mean, like, if you vote no, you usually explain why you're voting no.
And sometimes you can tell from the discussion, when we have the discussion before the votes, you kind of know. But that's been some of the background on roll call votes and votes.
Okay, but suffice it to say, at this point in time, it would simply be as it's worded here at the discretion of the presiding officer.
And in general, if it's a roll call vote, I'll just go 1 through 5.
Okay.
Like I said, that makes Ms. Ritchie uncomfortable, because she's always, let's see, if it's a 2-2 vote, and that's happened before, and you've been at the end of the
Very
line,
often.
so.
Yes.
I think if that's not fair, it could certainly go reverse order, so
I
5, 4,
usually
3,
do.
2,
I
1. You
don't
put me on the
know.
spot, I don't care one way or the other.
If I
so.
see that I'm gonna be the swing vote, I usually go first and make it right. I'm not gonna, I've requested, I have done that before.
Right. So that would be an example of, okay, if there was some issue here that, put undue pressure on Asher Street the last vote, I might say do it in reverse order, so we go back down the table this way. It always works out for Gordy.
Always in the middle.
So, okay,
Change the tide.
so that's sequence of voting. Next up,
Did we approve the sequence of voting?
No.
you'll need a motion in a second for that. The current thing is okay. If that's something that you want to discuss further, amend, or bring back to the January meeting for further discussion, we can do that.
It is how it is. I mean, we can't change it. Only you can change
It would seem like we need to approve that.
Yeah, so I need a motion in a second.
Motion that we approve that item number 6, the voting sequence as is currently described in policy 01.4.
Okay, motion by Mr. Heisel,
One second.
second by Mr. Parent. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
it. Sorry.
Motion carries 5-0. All right, let's
I
see.
missed out.
Next up is approved monthly meeting dates, times, and locations.
Okay, I really want to discuss this. These long meetings have got to stop. I know I'm not the only one that's getting, I mean, we sit here. So I don't know how we need to fix it, but sitting here until 10, 11 o'clock and having 2 or 3 meetings a month, I don't know what the problem is. Gordy, help me out here. I know,
Well, I
I see
agree.
your looks whenever,
You know, I've been in several districts, 5 districts as a matter of fact, and I've never been a part of meetings that have been this long. Most will go 30, 45 minutes. And I understand there's things sometimes that we go through that we have to discuss, but I think that every effort needs to be made to shorten. When I, look out into our crowd, most of our crowd is people that are within our district, people that are going to be going to work the next day. Most of the documents that we go over are things that are written by people in this crowd, and many times it seems like to me that we just read them back, and I in no way want to keep somebody from expressing their opinion. I think that's important to be able to do, but I think we need to try to make every effort to move our meetings along as quickly as possible without making somebody feel like that they're rushed.
I would agree with that. And one thing I've noticed is that some of our agendas have been short, but the meetings have been long, and kind of the meeting time just the discussion time just expands to fill the available space, so.
okay, so can I say this and you won't be offended?
No, that's fine.
I mean, since we're just putting it all out there tonight, can we not have them read them and read us everything we've already read? And I've told you that for years, that drives me crazy.
I'm fine with that. I don't generally argue with that. If Brenda comes up with a 30-page
Brenda
document,
is
say, please hit the high
fantastic.
points, okay? And she does, so.
But I mean,
think-
if I've read it, you've read it, you've read
Yeah.
it, we've all read it, we're voting on it. And yes, I mean, and somebody in the audience can read it, but like Gordy said, the people that are usually here are the same people that wrote it. So, and I mean.
I'll ask for that, no, let's take the CEDAT, for example.
I mean, if we're gonna do this, I would much rather become a working board this year.
Mhm.
I feel like we haven't, and I'm not being personal, but I would rather just get this all out here and let's all go forward.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
I appreciate that. I mean, because it's driving me crazy.
All right, would you all favor me placing time limits on discussion for certain items?
I don't know. if
I
we
can move
put a
meetings
timeline.
along a lot
I think
more
you've gotta,
quickly.
You gotta see, I think for one thing, many times when we have items that we have all the information in front of us, and we have someone from the schools or whatever presenting, there's no need for them to present the same information they've already given to us. And we can open that up for questions or whatever, and then And I do think it is your responsibility to keep everybody on task, but sometimes we do.
Right, we
We get off, and I've probably been as guilty of that as anybody else, because that's what happens sometimes. But I think we have to pay better attention to that, and, you know, I would just like for us to be a little bit more streamlined when we come to that.
Okay.
That's kind of what we said. So, I mean, I don't know how to fix it, but, you know, like when we have a huge crowd here for facilities, you know, there's gonna be a crowd, you know, they wanna hear what's being said. Yes, we need to have, that's gonna be a longer meeting.
Right.
I mean, that's just how it's gonna be. The crowd's gonna talk, you're gonna have more people sign in.
And there's a couple of things too, and I hate to, you know, mention some things about student recognition, because I think we really need to recognize students, but a lot of times, you know, the students are coming out, they're only being recognized in front of the principal. I mean, you know, I see UK ball games where they bring students in, they stop the game at the end of the quarter, they introduce the people, they can stay with their family, and then they would be in front of their student body. I don't know if that's an ideal or whatever, but I just hate sometimes that we'll have 15 students come out here and we'll recognize 15, 15 didn't show up, and then when they get
And then they all
recognized, when they go out, it's not like it's something that's really done for them. If you let them come to a ball game maybe or something else, then we can recognize them there. The other thing is, you know, the superintendent's report. Again, like I say, everybody that's in here is part of the superintendent's team. They know what they've done. I mean, I don't mind Mr. Christie writing that down and giving that to us, and if we have a question about what they've done, then let's ask Mr. Christie about that. And I know that's only 5 minutes, but that's 5 minutes. So, I mean, with 5 minutes here, and 5 minutes here, and 5 minutes there.
But when does the public get the information?
That's the other question.
You know, if we're
It
doing
is.
everything in writing, and yes, it is a board meeting, but we are responsible to the public,
Right.
and maybe the public doesn't, you know, we don't necessarily get all the written stuff on the superintendent's report. And people watching out there in TV land and online, hello, you know,
But those people are usually people that have already made contact with Paul or
I think-
Kudak and said, I have a problem with this, and do they not? I mean, that's. what
Yes
we-
and no, there are people that watch our meetings.
yes,
They watch our
yes.
meetings.
there
I mean,
are.
But I do think that's where your position comes in as the chair, is that you have to be able to make that decision. Does this warrant more discussion? Does this not warrant more discussion? Are we just here beating a dead horse right now? We need to vote on this. I think that's where, you know, we've got to come in and just, you know, stop it. And I'm with Judy on that. I know that the public, you know, they're going to be watching, and we shouldn't just come in here and just put everything as a consent item and go on. I think, you know, if somebody has something to say, especially if you're opposed to what's in there, I think you need to be expressed, because I like for people, if they vote no, I want to know why people voted no, because maybe you know something that I don't know. You know, come in with an open mind. If we got something to discuss, you know, let's discuss it. Let's make sure that.
In terms of the documents of reducing what we read, I think as long as it's put out on the website for the public to take a look at, I think we've accomplished that goal. So that might be another way to cut that short. But unfortunately, as they tried to teach us at my boot camp training, the issue of, you know, serial meetings, you know, in terms of trying to go ahead and hash some things out before the meeting, we're just simply constrained that a lot of the hashing out has to happen here.
Right.
So that's one of the important, that's one of the unfortunate,
And I don't want to
issues we have to
change
deal
that.
with.
I
Yeah.
mean, we need to. That,
So as
you've
long
got
as-
5 people and 5 different opinions.
so we'll have to leave certainly time for that, but I think if we can leave it on the public website, certainly every day before today, that's where I was relying on my information.
Right.
I think it's very useful for the public to have that. And I think it's useful for the public to have the video, certainly of all the regular meetings. Working meetings, I'm not sure we need a video of, but definitely all the regular meetings where there'll be votes. That's my opinion.
Okay. All right.
That's-
Here's a question. How would you like me to handle something that came up? Let's see. I'm going to pick on the gentleman from K9 because he made an extended presentation I wasn't expecting. How should I handle that as chair?
I think sometimes is that you have to speak up and say thank you for your time, and just, I mean, just go in there, and or you can say thank you for your time, but if board members, would you like to hear something else, or you have a question or whatever like that? And I mean, sometimes I think it's hard to catch your breath, you know, pause them in between, because he got on a roll.
He really did,
Went
yeah.
there,
so-
and And, you know, it's always good to have a policy that we limit our speakers to anyway, even if you know, if it's you know, you really don't want to sit there with a stopwatch on anybody. I mean,
Right.
people should be able to say what they want to say. But, you know, sometimes when they get, you know, like that, I think we had another one last year, I can't remember, someone that presented something else too, I can't remember exactly what it was, I think it was a drug presentation or something, and they just kept going and going.
Right.
And I'm like, we really need to hear all this, can we just stop them and just, say, you know, have any other questions or whatever? And, yeah, you have to be tactful, I guess, on
Yes.
this, you know.
Who talks to them, you or you? Like when these people, like, they came out.
Particularly the drug presentation, I told them 10 minutes, from start to finish, and they came into it expecting 10 minutes.
And really for what we
Without,
need
they
to
lose
hear,
track of time too.
you know, folks making the presentations should understand 10 minutes on a topic, and that's really.
Yeah, we usually got 50 things on agenda, we have 50 things on an agenda, 50 items.
Right.
I can pull your load.
Yeah, I mean, put it on us sometimes. If you don't want to take it, we'll take it. I'm sure
Well, I
Gordy has
think,
no problem.
I think
with that.
sometimes you just, you know, I understand you want to be courteous and those type of things. We do want people to feel like they can kind of be involved in, or especially the public, if they're doing public comment. But, you know, I think sometimes you do have to say, thank you, board members, is there anything else you can have or something like that. I think everybody has an interest and they can
Yeah.
carry on. I don't think you're gonna get too many complaints from me if you cut somebody short.
They'll watch somebody from in here all week and say, who do you want to hear?
Not Gordon.
Not Gordon. Gordon's to the point. I mean, that's, and I mean, if you all are doing your monthly meetings, I love that still, it's taking, if it's not, I would recommend going back to that. Between the two of you, you all can sort that out.
Right.
I mean, that's the thing, I think we've got away from, and it's just dwindled apart all the way since then. And I would like to see it go back together, and then we can get more organized, and life will be good.
Okay.
And then next year, you'll have a, that's my request.
Okay.
If that makes, I'm sorry, I rambled on, Gordy.
Hush.
Yeah, Gordy, put your low.
Well, no, this is a good example of how this happens, right? So,
Well, I just wanted it said, because every time I'm just like, I've already read this. And it wouldn't matter if Judy, you were my teacher in school, if you did that to me, it would drive me insane. I never could do that.
I will say one thing, stuff that comes before us needs to be typographically and grammatically correct, because sometimes we spend some, handbooks especially, we spend plenty of time correcting grammar on handbooks. So, if that's correct when it comes to us, then we can argue on principle and policy, just leave the grammar out of it, so I think that would be important.
I'm sure you're going to be talking something.
Committees also might be a useful tool
Oh, we got
in
that.
adjunct of the written meetings.
You know, that's an item that's not on here this time,
What?
committees.
Yes.
I'll put it on for January, because we'll need to, I can't remember who's on what committee, so.
I don't even remember what committee I'm on. Because it switched so many times. Oh, no, you can ready to get committee, sweetheart.
Everybody gets
Stop
one,
advice.
so. Okay, refocusing on the topic here.
Sorry, good job.
Let's see. This is Clark County Board of Education Board meeting dates, time, and location. So the first meeting is today. Monthly meetings are going to be the third Tuesday at 6:30. The 3 draft budget meetings, tentative budgets January 24th. Draft budget January 24th. Tentative budgets May 23rd. And then working budget is September 24th. There's 2 scheduled student achievement reports. One is October 24th, which is 4th Tuesday of October, assuming we have test scores back. And then second Tuesday in November is the second student achievement report. So, and the reason that didn't fall on the first Tuesday is because that's election day, so we give it a break between the 2 of those things. So I don't know if we're going to be voting for anything today or not. So, this year or not. So,
They look pretty similar to last year's report.
Yeah.
I'm assuming the notations on the back of prom and senior awards, this is not something we're setting, it's probably already been set.
That's Snow days will change that.
Yeah, snow days will change all that, because snow days, once you figure out the snow days, you can set the graduation rate after that, and all these other things go backwards.
But this was just for information purposes.
Right.
Yes.
This is not, we're not setting.
No, you're not
these,
setting
We're just
them.
setting the front page, okay?
No. So if we are on time and don't have any snow days, I think those are the
Okay, well, I'd like to make a motion, we approve this.
Okay. Motion by Mr. Heisel,
Second.
second by Mr. Parrott. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Next up is item number 8, board focus, Clark County Public Schools vision, mission, and goals. So the first meeting of the year is a good time to review the vision and mission statement. So you've got that. Our vision is one community, one vision, like Freddie, wherever student matters. Mission, we join with our community to address the individual needs of students in a safe, caring environment so they're prepared for college careers and life. And that was part of our strategic planning process, which happened a couple of years ago. So, board goals we have are stated there for 2015 and 2016. Many of the agenda items now articulated with those board goals, similarly that you would see with the Department of Education meetings. So, and it being 2017, those probably need to be revisited with one of the regular meetings. The Board of Education operating protocol, something that we've looked at. That's a document which has been here for review. It speaks to good board member behavior and basically working as a team.
Can I have a comment about that?
Yes, go ahead.
It refers to the board president. Should that be updated to refer to it as chairperson?
Probably. Though I didn't write this document, so
Are we approving this document or just acknowledging?
we're
it?
acknowledging it.
Okay.
Okay, so we're not approving this document?
Right.
Okay.
Which was that? No.
Well, if we're not approving it, then I'd be happy to acknowledge it.
Okay. All right. So let's see.
Huh?
Board powers and duties are spelled out in our policy manual. So those were actually reviewed, what, 2-3 years ago? We have a little window between redistricting and something else. We were able to get chapter 1 of the procedure manual done, revised. So, best practices for board members and mistakes board members make. Again, take a look at that, just acknowledge that. We'll look at it every year. And most important from the Attorney General's standpoint is acknowledging that we have reviewed the Kentucky Open Records and Meetings Act. So, and, let's see, this has been recently revised in August 2016, so those of us have been on the board for a while. Make sure you take a look at this and look at the changes that might be available. One thing we'll need to do is all board members will need to sign a piece of paper tonight that says that you acknowledge, because you understand that. So we'll need your signatures on that before we leave. So, okay. As there's no other business, the organizational meeting is adjourned. Or motion to adjourn the organizational meeting is in order.
I make a motion.
Motion by Ms. Ritchie,
Second.
second by Ms. Dex. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. We're adjourned at 6:29 p.m.
Your sign-off sheet for each of you's coming around for the open meeting operating.
County Board of Education, January 3rd, 2017. I'd like to welcome everybody, and let's go ahead and begin stand and observe the moment of silence. And the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First item of business is adoption of the agenda.
I move that we adopt the agenda as presented.
Motion by Ms. Hicks, second by Mr. Carter. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Public comments? None. Okay. All right, next up, item number 2 is discussion and possible approval of the guaranteed energy savings contract for KRS 45A and 702 KAR 416C through the Kentucky Purchasing Cooperative.
Okay, the purpose of the meeting, the board asked that we place this agenda item on a special call session to create an opportunity for discussion with regard to proposals. We did a work session in the recent past that gave us some guidance to look at some projects with some specificity. So the purpose of the topic today is to facilitate discussion on the board and answer any questions you may have, given the proposal that's on your table. I will say to you that we have invited some folks here that may be able to address some questions that we might struggle a bit with. We have Mark Riles here, who's the director of KDC and oversees the KDC projects. Is that correct? And then we have Mark Riles here, who's the business manager for PSI, and 2 engineers, Bart Strong and Gary Sparg, who's mechanical and lighting engineers for PSI, that coordinated all the bidding from the contractors and helped with the design as they researched our facilities, visited our facilities, and determined, in their professional opinions, what we need to be looking at. So that's in front of you. You had an opportunity to review that very comprehensive report. Again, I've addressed some questions in the past week or 2 regarding the KDC process and how that works and pre-approved vendors. And if you have any specific questions as to how that works or what vendors are available and things of that nature, I would direct that to Mr. Riles. He certainly has a lot of expertise in that area. So, having said that, I'd like to open up the table for questions or comments, get some direction from you as to how you want for us to proceed from this point on.
Can you discuss a little bit about the financing? So basically, his cash contribution is going to be upfront for us, and that's going to come from contingency, correct?
From your general fund contingency.
Okay, correct.
That amount is $10,500,000+.
That's the total price of the project. The project requires a 50% match, Mark, which would be half of that would be the requirement for the cash general fund match.
And can you go over how the rest of the financing would go?
Okay, basically KDE has initiated a program that allows districts to leverage funds based on potential or expected energy savings with the KDC program and process. Very basically, school districts can leverage bonding capacity, general fund bonding capacity to initiate projects, central plant projects, lighting projects, energy saving projects that essentially the half of the total project cost would be funded by the energy savings that it initiated. For example, in this particular project that you're looking at, the guaranteed energy savings that's estimated on this project is roughly $309,000 a year. KDE will allow us to leverage the bonds commensurate with paying back that money over a 20-year period at a payment of about $307,000 or $309,000. So that's how you get to the project total scope. Half of that project that's not matched with general fund dollars, with cash, can leverage bonds that would be paid for with energy saving funds annually for the course of a period of time, and in this case it's 20 years. Anything else that you'd like to add, Mark, or anyone?
A couple of things. Thank you for inviting me, first of all. It's very nice to see some old friends. And Donald mentioned I'm an agent, basically. Tonight's in capacity, I'm an agent of KEDC, and that's the Kentucky Educational Development Cooperative, which Clark County is a member of. And KEDC provides numerous services to schools and districts, including facilities, in a very limited way. And so one of the things that I would tell you is that I'm basically work for you, whether you do this project with KPC vendors or not. I'm still a resource, and I know Donald and Paul, we've occasionally they have called for me. So that's the capacity. Part of my duty is to develop what they call price contract arrangements, and these basically KPC goes through the exact same process that the Clark County Board of Education goes through for a particular project. So in the case of if we were doing a roofing project, we have to have a BG1, we have to bid it, we have to have things approved, we have to have architects, we have to have every process that you go through. Similarly, we have various venues for that, and our focus is on best value and basically trying to minimize the risks for local school districts. So why would you use KPC? Ultimately, KPC believes that they can bring a certain amount of expertise to the table and create venues, and they have some advantages because of their scale and other reasons and resources, but the idea is to minimize risks for schools, to give districts other alternatives to doing projects in lieu of just basically taking them on themselves. So in the case of the energy project, an RFP was created. It was open. It was an open competition. If you read the statute, and I would recommend that you do, you will probably be a little disappointed in, especially if you're a person who has done procurement or is familiar with everything from bonding to cost accountability. The statute's very disappointing in terms of its minimum standards. I will tell you that the statute was written by vendors, for vendors, and KPC basically, they don't really try to do everything. They try to focus on things that are brought to them from the district. So for instance, roofing is an area sometimes the districts have difficulties with, so we have a roofing venue, and so on. But in the case of energy, the minimum standards and some of the things that school districts had experienced were a bit disappointing, and so they came to the superintendents came to KPC and said, can we do something different? So a fair amount of research was put into this process. The process that has been adopted without a whole lot of detail is what the federal government uses. It's very transparent. Everything from the soft costs and the design, project management, commissioning, even overhead and profit are all fully disclosed, and they were competitively vetted. And then when the hard costs on the other side are also competitively bid with qualified contractors, you get a minimum of 3 for each component, and the board gets to see all of that information, and you get to select and have input on that. So we were hopeful that when it was advertised that we would get a good response to this, right? It seemed to be very healthy, good for the industry, but unfortunately we had a fairly limited response. We did have 2 vendors. They had competed in other states, and so they were familiar with what they needed to do to be competitive with each other. And we feel like we got really solid numbers on their soft costs. And basically, they had agreed in their contract with KPC to abide by all of the rules that have been established in the RFP. It's more than you need, and it's complicated, but all of this is posted on the KPC website. The RFP is posted, all the requirements. I think it's important to say that the statute is clear that you cannot you shall not award these based on cost, but cost can be a factor. So we wanted accountability for cost. We didn't tell vendors what they could make. We just asked them, what can we expect as overhead on projects? And we also asked for qualifications and all the other things. So it's a fairly, not fairly, it's a very comprehensive rubric for a point system for the award. And in case we were fortunate that both of our vendors were very competitive and met the requirements, and so we actually have two. So having said all that, which is maybe too much, back to the thing about finance, in theory, many of the districts aren't fortunate enough to have general fund available for these kinds of projects, and so they actually pledge the savings. The statute provides, subject to some conditions, that the energy savings actually provides the debt service. So in your case, and again, I haven't seen the debt service schedule, so chime in on this, but in theory, you should be able to recover the money that you put down on this through the savings over time, okay? And I know in the bond sale, I believe, the vendor, as part of the process, will provide a schedule of all of that, and so you'll be able to see that in a summary form. And generally, the fiscal agent presents that at the appropriate time, and so you can get a sense of how that looks. I don't know if that answered your question, Mr. Cudick, but I think the important part of it is the savings aspects of it. In simple terms, you make a capital improvement, say lighting, that will generate a certain amount of savings on an annual basis, and you're allowed to put that into debt service. And there's some other things that are fairly restricted, but that's basically, in simple terms, how it works, and then you're able to do 50% capital, 50% general fund savings. And again, it can be a pretty good delivery method, provided that you get to see all of the costs and you get to look at everything compared to a conventional bid spec delivery.
And the bonds are not FFCC, so they're general fund bonds. It doesn't affect our bonding capacity for major construction projects.
That's correct. Actually, the bond, and just to be clear, when you do your BG1, you'll have a building fund capital outlay component and a general fund component. So the debt service will come from both places. I'm not exactly sure when you put the cash down up front how that works exactly, but it'll be one bond issue that has a component of general fund and capital is the way it usually works.
In this particular proposal, there's about a $2,000 difference between projected energy savings and the annual bond debt.
Why only one proposal? I'm still not clear on that.
Mark kind of touched on that.
Yes.
There's two companies, and as it's,
But we only have it from one company.
that's correct. And as I understand, and I'll ask these guys to chime in if they feel the need, but as I understand it, the price, the bids that came in when it was opened up for companies, two companies took advantage of those, and their pricing were almost neck and neck. I mean, there's hardly any difference at all between what one company is offering versus the other one. And both companies have access to the same contractors that have been approved through the process as well. So when you look at multiple companies, you're really looking at differences that are related not necessarily to pricing or costs, but to the quality of services that you may get with the supervision, the engineering fees. And
Yes,
things of that
so
nature.
why can't we see that from the other company?
If you so choose, you can. Mark, would you like to reflect on that as well?
Yeah, there's a couple things here. I think the first thing is, so normally the main reason that you want to have multiple companies is cost.
But that's not the only thing.
Not the only thing. So, let's talk about cost real quick. So, this might be bad, Mark, correct me, but I kind of think about energy companies is a bit like a construction manager, where multiple prime contracts are being bid to them. They are the overseer, and in fact, they're more than the overseer, because in construction management delivery, if it's not at risk, the construction manager may not have as much responsibility as these folks do, because they're actually responsible for the full implementation. They're responsible for the schedule. They're responsible for everything from the bonding to it's a single source, like a general contractor. So how do you select a construction manager? Well, usually you interview and you pick them based on their qualifications, is the theory. And the prices are fixed by regulation. And so we've kind of used that strategy to fix the pricing, i.e. everything from the cost of design to the overhead profit and so on and so forth. So if you have that fixed and you have 3 bids, let's say you have multiple companies, well, a lot of those contractors will be bidding to the same company, or different companies, right? So, so from a cost standpoint, what we believe is that if you have the right company and you have the right solution, the cost issue is kind of flushed out because of the transparency of the process. We can furnish you the numbers from our other contractor, and you can see those soft costs. And again, they're subject to the same requirements that they have to have 3 bids on every component. So then another reason, so maybe I should ask another reason to look at multiple vendors would be.
Okay, this gets a little personal here. In my day job, I manage the proposal process for a firm. And in our process of developing a proposal, preparing a proposal, and evaluating a proposal, we look not only at cost, we look at what we are submitting as our company profile, what people are going to be involved in this. Knowing that, many of our costs are set, we know what the project is going to be because the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet says this project is going to be bid for this. So all engineering firms are selling the same thing,
Yes.
our service.
Yes.
So when I look at this proposal, which is a fabulous proposal, but what I was expecting to see was 2 more very similar, so that I can look at all of this stuff that I prepare for my company, and I'm evaluating this not just on the bottom line, though that plays a very, very important part in it, but I want to see what this company is like, what other projects has it done, where are these projects,
Right.
what were some special features about this project.
Right.
And okay, this is the company, and we have identified your problem. This is how we're going to solve it, and this is why we are the best company to solve it.
Right.
That's what I do every day.
Right.
And so when I'm looking here, yeah. Okay, where's the other one?
Right.
And I didn't have that.
Okay.
And if their costs are going to be basically the same, but I want to know about the other companies.
Okay. Well, and there's 2 things. I think for the board, to be fair, let's first talk about KPC. Of course, KPC went through that process, right? And we have all that information from the other company, which we certainly can provide to you, and it's available on the web, but we'll be, however you need to get that, and we can even come and at some point, you can talk to the company, whatever you want to do, but you can see all that. So, here's the thing. We think we got two companies and not more because they didn't want to subject themselves to the rigor of our pricing effort. And there was also rigor in the quality of design. There are other things. They're qualifications based, quality based, that demonstrate their overall performance characteristics. So we can do all that. Now, you're still, if you do that, you'll have 2 companies. And I'm not sure, that may give you some satisfaction. I think probably with this conversation, we should do that. The thing that I would tell you is, and again, I'm trying to, whatever direction you take is obviously your decision. The things that would be, my focus would be, one of the advantages that you have with Performance Services is you have experience with them, which I think is meaningful. And I think the performance, my understanding of the performance, especially at the high school, and its energy performance is really second to none. I don't know that there's a high school in Kentucky that performs at 35 kiloBTUs or whatever. So their performance has been solid. If you need to look at different design options, they certainly can do that for you. So if you say, well, I looked at this proposal and I'd like that, and they have scenarios, because I know, what little I know, is that they run through scenarios of different systems to see which one would suit you best and have the best paybacks and so on and so forth. So the point of all that conversation is that what we were trying to do with KPC is put contractors in front of school districts where we could feel confident that your risks were minimized and that all of the services that you needed, whether it be different multiple designs, whether it be different pricing, could all be provided by an individual contractor. And we had already we already vetted them through a filter. If we had more contractors, the merrier. My sense is still that the other companies were reluctant to submit themselves to the rigor of the RFP.
But back to your specific comment you made a couple times, if just for our own information, we want to see the other proposal,
Absolutely.
you all can send us a PDF of it.
Absolutely.
And we can look at it and say, okay, we've looked at it, we've done our due diligence, and now we've weighed them together, and we want to continue down the path that you all are recommending. So you all can send that to us.
Absolutely. And I think, the other thing would, if necessary, I'll offer this, there's a lot to this business, this energy business. And so if we needed to come and go through the RFP, maybe in a work session, or if you just wanted to ask questions or send me questions, I'll be glad to offer anything that I possibly can there to help you to understand what it was that we did and why we did it. That helps.
When we're looking at this sort of expenditure, I like data.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We just had that conversation. This is a big project for you. It's a very important project for you. Again, we're, at least I'm very sensitive to the wonderful things that you guys have done, which were very hard for equity and adequacy. We're working in a district in Covington right now it's a very big uplifting thing in facilities for them to have improvements there. And so this is a big move for you. So yeah, I would ask all the questions you need and anything we can do to help give you some comfort that, and like I say, there may be something we left out, but we put a fair amount of effort into this to ensure that, if you're in that business, a lot of the quality of the response has to do with the questions you ask in the RFP, right? And the implications of some of those things are rather serious when you're talking about profits that can be made and what kinds of strategies can be used, which might not benefit the school district. And I'm not being critical of other companies, but we are happy that we had two companies that competed strongly against each other and brought forth the right things. So I'm glad to share that.
At this point, you still have many options on the table that you can consider as important. Mark's mentioned two of those. You can ask PSI to go back and look at other systems for you. You could get the other company involved in doing support. And you could not go with KBC and bid it out yourself, which would be an extended process. But when RFP's out there, have other companies bid out. But I would note that benefit of going with the co-op is that it's already been bid, it's already been, the vendors have been approved by the state. You save a great deal of time in the process between starting the project and scoping and bidding the project. There's a great deal of time savings there, and there's money savings because fees have already been established and the percentages are lower than what the state would mandate to companies that are not part of the co-op program. There's those percentages that they set that can be charged for engineering architectural fees that are higher than what the co-op has been able to coordinate through their open bid process. And the next quote, if you were to choose to do another quote from another company, even within this program, may not look like what the one that you have right there, because PSI advocates for open book pricing, laying everything they have right there in the paperwork for you to see and analyze, which is giving us the bicycle, they analyze numbers, project out. Other bids may not look like that, because other companies do not practice open book pricing and put the numbers on paper for you. So there's a lot of pluses and minuses to
So within the educational co-op, the vendors in this particular program do not have to use open book pricing?
No, they absolutely did.
the
Okay.
two companies.
The two companies that have been
Right,
together,
okay.
one's
But
did
if
to
you open
us.
that up to other companies like CMPA, for example, or Train, they're not
Right.
subject to it.
No.
So it seems like we would like to at least see the PDF of the other options.
Yes.
So
Sure.
let's assume that's a done deal, that we're gonna get that. So, but then, for today's discussion, then we have the folks from, make sure I describe it correctly, Performance Services here with us. And so back on the other half of the topic, if we said, well, we don't like this particular technology that's been specified, tell us the pros and cons of this versus something else, that would be a discussion we could have this evening, or.
They're here to answer your questions related specifically to that.
And I think we need to also talk about how the energy savings roll up into a bond, because that's where half the daggone money's coming from. And Mark Saunier, Performance Contracting, was kind enough to send me an email on that was prepared. Unfortunately, it didn't show up on this computer because I need to download that new version of Excel. Apparently, Excel 2003 is not early enough. That talks about that, and I think the key thing there is a couple things. Is the energy savings might start out at, let's say, the annual energy savings of $230,000, but you all are assuming an inflation of that, and so they start out at $230,000, but by year 20, they're $403,000. That's part of what goes to it, and the energy savings, you guys are guaranteed, so that's your all's column. So from $230,000 to $403,000, that's on you all, okay? The operations and maintenance savings portion that goes from $79,000 to $139,000, that is not something you all are guaranteeing.
That's correct. That's something we work with the school district and work with the superintendent and get all the data from the school, work with all the information we can get from the school, their data, and we come up with something. The school actually comes up with that with us. You all have to agree to that, and it has to be very realistic, very conservative, because you do have to get that number to be able to pay the bond. So,
And those details on that calculation, that $79,000, are not in this book. That's something you can share with us also,
correct.
because we'll want to go through our due diligence of making sure that passes the smell
And
test.
I read a section in there too that said that there's a percentage of the overall savings that calculates that O&M in part.
So that's one way to do it. So our competitors, usually estimate 50% of the energy savings. We take your actual O&M savings, and that's what we use. But you can preliminary, you might have seen
That was in-
data a
that
long
was in
time
this
ago
report.
where we can calculate it based on a percentage, but by the time we get to this stage, we have to have exact numbers.
Right,
that's
and we provided those exact, we've gone back, 4 years and provided all the funds that our maintenance program has provided for contractors to come in and do maintenance on the systems that are building in here. So it's getting a little more specific in that regard, but
I think we'll want to see those details, but I think your point is still made that in this proposal, at least on the surface of it, looks like that part assumes a 3% inflation rate.
that's correct.
And since that's what drives the payment of the bonds, if inflation is 0% for the next 20 years, then that's not going to go, our savings won't go from 79 to 139.
And these are typically very conservative in nature.
So these projects have been done for the last 20, 25 years, and the typical escalation rates run somewhere between 3 and 6%. We picked the lowest. So but your concerns are, you're asking the right questions.
I would add to that, it's inflation, but it's based on, get me, if I get this wrong, Mark, correct me, but it's based on the projection of the utility rates based on past utility rates. So inflation might be whatever, but the utility rate increase will be looked at over a period of time, I don't know, 10 years or something. So they look at how much did utility rates increase. Unfortunately, my sense is they're going to increase quite a bit with the coal situation in Kentucky. And they have recently, but the 3%, if you think about your electric bill at home, how much has that gone up? I mean, it's not uncommon to have a 9% increase,
We got
in
one
1
today,
year. So-
LG&E is going, they're asking us to commit a few dollars again like we did in the past to help the energy folks fight this. LG&E is proposing a 9-point-something% increase and KU is proposing a 6.4 increase.
But again, to separate that out, we've got the first column, which is the annual energy savings. They're estimated 3%, but that's on performance services, whether it's, if the energy savings don't pan out and they don't increase in that inflation rate, that's on performance services. If something changes in the whole, in the energy structure and energy rates don't go up over the next 20 years, that column that's part of their guarantee, and that is their problem.
You want me to answer that? Tell me if I get this wrong. My understanding is the guarantee is on the units of energy. So the rate of increase is not guaranteed, correct?
It's KBTU is what's guaranteed.
So so there is a risk that if they didn't go up 3% a year, there would be a risk. I would tell you that, again, based on the industry standard, 3% is the lowest I've ever heard. Most of the time, I've heard 7%, which is, I wouldn't recommend to you. But 3% is the lowest that I've heard. And if you look at rates over a period of time, I think it's very unlikely that we won't have that.
Well, and I don't necessarily disagree with you. I just wanted to know
Yes.
what the parameters of this is. It's the BTUs that you all are guaranteeing.
Yes.
And we multiply that times the rate to get the estimated savings.
Yes.
And then you'll have then further estimating, you know what rates are now, and you're going to estimate the rates will go up on an average of 3% per year.
Yes.
But the BTUs is what you all are guaranteeing. If rates don't go up for some absurd reason, then I think it would be absurd, then we still got to make the bond payments out of our general fund. But it also very well could be that rates go up, 3.5% over the next 20 years, and so that's a bet that we came out ahead of. But you're not guaranteeing the money, just the BTUs. And the operations and maintenance savings, you all are going to give us details on that, and that's something that was developed in-house, and we'll have to see what the assumptions are there. Saying, so in general, are those coming from in-house personnel, or is that coming from outside contractors?
I think most of our calculations have come from outside contractors and equipment that we purchased.
Okay, so that is
Not
something,
including in-house personnel.
that's something that can be turned off and on. As opposed to, let's say, the maintenance savings was, well, we're not gonna have to send our folks out to do something, and we're gonna save $10,000 a year of it. And I would say, well, did the guys go home early that day?
Right, I think any labor that's factored into the O&M is for contractual service outside of our employee department. That's correct.
Do you know what bond, what interest rate they assumed on this?
3.5.
May I say something real quick? I just want the board to be aware of where we are currently on debt service. We currently have $3.3 million that is being paid out of capital outlay, and with what we bring in, that's leaving about $500,000. And out of that, 220 is KISTA debt straight out of general fund, which is contingency money. So, I mean, if you want to take that into consideration in discussing that if we don't get the guaranteed rate and all of that, that it comes out of general fund, that's a consideration we need to have on the table of where we currently are on debt, and we're adding that much more debt to it. looked at in more detail, but just to,
But on the flip side, you have to also consider if you do nothing and the rates increase and you're using higher consuming equipment, the impact could be even more severe.
As I said, I don't disagree with the 3% assumption. I just want to make sure that everybody understands
Good
what's
point.
behind the curtain on this.
Good point. Also, good point about the O&M, because I know, again, I know our companies, they're conservative and they use documented, and also are very considerate of your point about if it's not outsourced, is it a real savings or not? Because you've got to pay your people anyway.
That's right.
So whether they're there or here, you still got to pay them. So if it's not contracted out, it's really, is it a real savings or not?
That was a concern I had.
Yeah,
The figures
good
we
point.
send you will be based on contracted service.
Excellent.
The way that the soft costs are calculated, where design engineering is stated to be 5%, but because it's 5% after factoring in the costs that are above it, so it's an effective 6.4%. Is that typical, the way that's calculated in the other contracts that you've seen? So for example, they're charging design engineering on the bond cost, the way the math works out. Is that typical?
So I did a sheet comparing how percentages are typically calculated and the way it's done in this case. So Mark can walk you through this, or I can. But that's a good question, because energy is, the percentages are calculated for a typical construction project one way. And so he demanded that, KPC said you have to apply the percentages at the right time when you're factoring in these costs of the project. So when in typical construction project, you have an insulation contractor that will insulate the pipe and the ductwork, and he'll bid his price to the mechanical contractor. So when he does, he marks it up 15%. And that's not just, you don't have to take that from me or Mark Rouse or anybody. There's some data from there's a national group called RSBs, and they investigate all these percentages.
I don't have a problem with that. I think that's a very reasonable scenario. And anytime y'all want me to stop chit-chatting, just let me know. But like, for example, the KPC administration fee, the way that it works, it says 2%, but it's actually, if you calculate it, it's 2.17%, so that's getting inflated. That's also getting inflated up. The bond cost at 1% is getting inflated up the way these numbers work. And my question to you is that typical, or is that something we can get into the details and perhaps move some of those non-contractor amounts to the bottom, so we're not paying design engineering for bond cost?
The right answer to that, Mr. Heisel, is I'm not really prepared to, because I don't have that sheet. So I think the answer would be yes, we need to dig into that a little bit more so that I fully understand the question and can answer it properly for you.
Fair enough, that'll be the follow-up item.
Yeah.
So Scott, how did you determine that the KBC administration fee of 2% was actually 2 point something else? What numbers do I need to use to do that?
I'll send you my version of the spreadsheet, which the folks at Performance Services, thank you very much for sending me your spreadsheet, so then I could then take it and rejig it around and try to understand it a little bit better. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate that. Otherwise, I'd have even more dark circles under my eyes than I do. But if you take the total cost above soft cost, the way I calculated, accepting when I could have made a mistake, because that happens, I get 7.522 million. I don't think it's on the sheet, but I'll share this with you later on.
Okay, that's fine, that's fine.
We're just learning right now.
Yes.
So if you take that number of what all the equipment cost, and then I ran across what each one of these items were, and then divided it back out to see what cost is the bond amount for the equipment. I'll share that with you, and I'll certainly share with all my other fellow board members.
The great thing is you have that spreadsheet, because most of the time you don't get that information.
And it's rare that you work for a company like Performance Services where Mr. Heisel asked for the Excel sheet with all the formulas in it. Let me see the raw sheet. This is a great company in my view because we gave it to them. And we want y'all to be the most educated customer you can be. The more educated you are, the better chance we have to have a good project that nothing, you
And
know.
a better chance that we will select you.
Exactly. Well, everybody else gets selected without doing that, but the better chance at the end of the day, you're gonna say, wow, that was a good project. See, since we tell you everything, you know, we can't make that much because we're telling you how much we make. We're showing you exactly our calculations, we're showing you all the formulas. So, yeah, up front, other guys are slicker than I am, I guess. They get picked without all this, but yeah, maybe I need all this, yeah. We do have information on how we came up with the systems we selected. And it just so happens that you all have had a strong facility group for 8 or 9 years. So your facility group in particular has always been real focused on saving energy. So 8 or 9 years ago, your BTU, your EUI, your KBTU per square foot was 75. You know, today it's getting where it's half that. And the way you all decreased your energy use by 50% is your facility guys focused on, okay, they asked the questions you're asking right now. Why would we do water source heat pumps instead of unit vents? Why would we do unit vents instead of VRV? Why aren't we using fluorescent bulbs instead of LED? You know, why are we picking what we're picking? Well, you have LED going in as lights because lighting technology has come a long way. Now it's cheap enough to where it pays for itself, so you're getting a lot of benefit on LED lighting. As far as HVAC systems, VRV is the most popular system out there.
That was VRV.
Variable refrigerant volume or variable refrigerant flow. So it's a system where instead of varying the airflow, you vary the refrigerant volume to each cassette. So the downside of that is you have hazardous gas going to every classroom. So generally, you know, I wouldn't want my 8-year-old going to a classroom with hazardous gas in it. So that's
We
one.
don't have any schools with that system.
Yeah, you don't have any. So, and that's one thing your facility group always said, we're not gonna do that. But that goes in most schools now. And people don't think about that gas going into every classroom. The other thing they don't think about is how much energy are we actually gonna use? Because they'll come in here, those guys that push that product, and they'll say, hey, the transfer of energy, you're gonna save all this energy here and there. But if you look at the actual energy use in a school building, it uses more energy. So we actually ran energy models, and we have a very detailed model of new GRC. And new GRC, we ran it with geothermal, with water source heat pumps, with a standard energy recovery unit, with the best energy recovery unit, and we compared.
ERU, that's what that means.
Simcoe.
ERU, that's right,
Simcoe.
energy recovery. So what we found, when we compared all those systems 5 years ago or 7 years ago, whenever you looked at the high school, we found that chill beam was the lowest. It's 20% less than geothermal water source heat pumps. Well, it still exists today, that differentiator, but we ran them all again. The company, I work with a new company now. The company I used to work with merged into this company. So there's different engineers and they ask more questions, so we had to run them all again based on these new schools, the Strode and Baker. And we looked at unit vents, we looked at water source heat pumps, we looked at VRF, or VRV, they're called either one of those names. And then we looked at chill and beam. and Chill Bean was where you got the most bang for your buck.
And we've already been through this process twice. At GRC, we chose Chill Bean. At Campbell, we chose Chill Bean. Now, here we are again, and we're considering Chill Bean. Just to note that we've already chose Chill Bean twice through this process. It's worked very well for us. From the maintenance perspective, we love eliminating the filter systems.
But you all didn't, just to reiterate what you just told me, you didn't start with the assumption that we're gonna do chill bean.
Right.
Chill bean would work well, but let's put that aside. You just told me that you all looked at all the different scenarios and what made the most sense in total that happened to be chill bean. But
Right.
you absolutely looked at all the different scenarios of how to skin this cat.
We had to, number one, these guys demand we do it every time, but number two, I work for a different company now than I worked for before. This company I work for now, they want to see all that data. So we had to, Bart and Gary, we all have to crunch all those numbers and get it approved. We have to show more files, so it's a good exercise because it's important information.
And part of that decision was based on the capital we had to invest as well. Idealistically, I would advocate more for geothermal in Chill Bean, but that's gonna cost us a lot more money, a lot more of your capital in your general fund. But I think part of the consideration for quoting, as it was quoted, was based not only on what system is the most efficient and what's best to meet our needs, but also on what funds we have to invest in systems.
But back to geothermal, you all looked at
We
geothermal
did.
in here, and you ran the numbers on it, and you said the payback is too long.
Right, so the pay, you get a lot more bang for your buck with a new chiller, new boiler, and Chill Bean. So that ended up being where you could receive the most benefit for what your investment was.
And both the downsides, just chillers, 2 to 1 in each difference, so that's a big.
So you understand that.
So you really, I think you know this by the question you asked, but Mark asked me to clarify. So you can choose Chill Bean and geothermal. In fact, that's what you have at your high school. You had Chill Bean and geothermal.
It's not in this proposal,
It's not
because
in
you all
this
felt
one,
that
right.
the payback wasn't advantageous
Right.
in this particular
Right.
scenario.
Right.
With the Chill Bean, with the decision to use Chill Bean, does the configuration of the building or the stuff, just where every building is kind of different in design and shape or whatever, does that make a difference?
It sure does. So like if your ceilings were 17 feet high, you can't do Chill Bean.
Okay.
There's a bunch of restrictions. So you have to take every building you consider, you have to evaluate each building.
Okay.
So you have to actually go in and lay out where would you
That's-
place the Chill Beans, where would you?
Yes.
And then same with the water source heat pumps. So if you want to use water source heat pumps at Baker and Street, you'd have to consider how much ceiling space do you have? Or are you gonna put it on the wall? So you gotta tear out that unit ventilator, put in a water source heat pump, then you're gonna have compressor in every room. Is that gonna make noise? It does make noise. So Chill Beans are quiet. You don't have compressors, you don't have fans, you don't have filters, you don't have condensate fans, you don't have condensate drains. You take away a lot of operation and maintenance costs with,
And that's where those, back to your question, that's where a lot of those figures are coming from.
The other districts, we're certainly not the only district in the world ever to do a retrofit of a 25-year-old building. How were other districts surrounding us doing their retrofits?
that's a good question. And I think we might have talked about this at that KSBA conference. So the other ones are doing VRF most of the time.
Depends on what engineer.
And how come?
Because architects love that because it doesn't take much space, but neither does Chill Bean. I bet this is one man's opinion, my honest opinion, VRF came out of Asia, a company called Daikin, a company called LG. They had a ton of marketing dollars. They came in and spent a ton of money marketing that product here in the United States, and it very much was successful. But there's a lot of data, all the data supports it's going to use more energy. The refrigerants in every room, there's no way they can deny that. And there's no way they can deny the energy use. So ASHRAE's an organization of HVAC engineers, mechanical engineers. Their headquarters is in Atlanta. So they built one floor with BRF and one floor with water source heat pumps. And it kept showing that water source heat pumps in Atlanta were saving them so much more money. And Daikin, the company that supplied the BRF, with their clout, they stopped all their information from coming out for 7 or 8 years. So it's political how the other manufacturers win.
A different perspective is, I think someone mentioned, I think it depends on the building and the engineers. You know, you have buildings where geothermal field is problematic because there's not space, might be an urban site. Maybe the geotechnical doesn't allow geothermal wells that are not cased, and so it's not possible. Chill beam has been used in Allen County, and a lot of it depends on the engineers. There's some certain engineers are more comfortable with it. It's fairly innovative. There were other engineers who at one point would never use geothermal, and eventually they shifted, which it might surprise you which companies, but
So that's work for us.
it's a somewhat, I won't say new technology, but it's newer, and some engineers are more confident with it than others. And again, I think it depends on the tip of the building, you know, that you have, what ceiling spaces you're working with, what's the feasibility of it. And then again, it comes back to some point capital.
Train will push water source heat pumps, the MTA will push Daikin, BRVs. I mean, the companies, the engineers will push the products they sell.
Have their preference.
The unintended consequence you get as well with chill beam is you have to have more fresh air than you normally have. So studies show that this additional fresh air that you get with chill beam will lower your absenteeism by 9%. It'll also increase test scores anywhere from 4 to like 23%, depending on which reports you believe in. But there's a lot of data out there to support that the fresh air and the comfort, the low sound noise, there's no fan, no compressor in the room, the low noise and the fresh air will allow you to have better attendance and better test scores.
Would you describe that as icing on the cake or
Yeah.
not?
Yeah, because we don't, this was an energy project, but actually when we do an energy project, we do consider all that. But in this case, I guess I would describe it as icing on the cake, but that's bad that I'm saying that should be one of the primary
But
things we consider.
when you looked at the cost of BRF, the bottom line cost, the long-term cost,
It's all similar. When you all did new GRC, the cost was $19.50 per square foot for the mechanical system. BRF runs that, water source heat pump runs that. Geothermal typically is $4 or $5 more a square foot.
but BRF, water source heat pump, when you said similar, within 5%, shall we say?
Yeah, I mean, that's safe, yeah.
It's such a big number here. Have you all kicked around alternatives that if this was just too big a bite for us to take, and we felt nervous at this number? Are there other alternatives that maybe we could tweak this, solar here and there, something like that? Have you all given any run numbers on other alternatives? Let's assume that we go with performance services and we'll go with the technology of chilled beam. What alternatives are left to us from there?
Well, you're somewhat restricted in the very nature of the energy contract itself. You can't get approved in energy contract just by doing your boilers, chillers, your big equipment, that's high dollar equipment. You don't get enough energy savings to justify meeting the criteria for an energy savings contract and accessing the types of bond funds. You have to include other systems that generate your energy savings. If you look at this particular proposal, you see most of your energy savings is generated in lighting. Retrofitting to the LEDs, that's your biggest savings across the board. It's not in your boilers, your chillers, your Senco units, or the energy recovery units on the roofs or wherever they're located at. It's in your lighting, your controls. You get a big savings from your controls and your lighting is your big push. As you restrict the program, as you bring it down, if you restrict those components that generate your biggest savings, you have a couple of options. Either you find other programs that generate equal savings in some other capacity, or you reduce your focus on boilers, chillers, and other big ticket items. So in answering your question, if you just wanted to focus on 2 schools as opposed to looking at putting, air handler units on shear or looking at geothermal, you're going to have to reduce the number of schools that you're looking at your large plant management types of equipment.
I think where I was leading around.
Yes,
to
there are
is
some
if
areas that we could look at, solar being one at some schools where the payback is much longer than what we're talking about here. It's not a quick enough turnaround payback. There are some buildings that we could cut solar off. There are dollars that can be cut off this cost of this because of cutting those. And I don't think will affect the bonding potential or anything else that we're talking about. It certainly won't affect the energy savings.
Is that right, Mark?
Yeah, so we invest about 1% for each project, so we've invested a little over $100,000 to come up with this proposal. But to answer your question, Paul's exactly right. So if you want us to go back and shave off costs, see if we can pull off some solar, pull off different things to get that number down, you're the boss. We work for you.
And Don did give you a real good description there, though. I mean, in general terms, his point, I think you understand.
You're gonna
As you
cut
trim
some.
back the savings, that's a good point. On the other hand, there are things that can be tweaked, and a benefit of the transparency of this process is you can do that. You can check, whereas if you didn't know what's in front of you and someone cut back on your scope, you wouldn't know. So that's a great thing, that you have opportunities to look at each thing individually and say, weigh that, how important is it? Is it important that I set my contractor, my installer, and the quality of that? I can do that. Is there someone you want to invite that you know is really good? You can have them part of the conversation. So you have that opportunity with the transparency.
All right, Joel, I'm going to go ahead and stop discussion. So there's a list of questions that have been generated that I believe some board members would like some answers to. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the way this item was worded was discussion and possible approval. So we could either vote now, or we could get some answers to some of the questions that have been discussed and bring this back probably at the January meeting. So it'll be in 2 weeks. If that's okay. So. Let's see, the list of things I have, we wanted to see data from other companies. And correct me if I'm wrong, or edit this as you see fit.
That'd be one other company, is that?
The one other company.
The other
The other, yeah, the other KBC company, so we'll need that. Let's see, Scott wanted the additional O&M detail fleshed out. Did you need anything about BTUs versus actual money? There was a little bit of discussion about that.
Well, I think I was clarifying it. I think we would like to get sent around the same spreadsheet that you sent me on how the math works on the saving, just so everybody understands
Okay.
where the magical $5 million comes from.
Okay.
It's not real magic, just where.
We can get some information on the district's current cash position from Ms. Alicia and how this would affect it. And let's see.
I think what I was talking about, and I don't want to cross
Okay.
out what you're saying, is just what you sent me, Mark, is share that around with everybody
Okay.
else as it came directly from Ross St. Clair.
Right.
Okay, so that's fine. And let's see, any possible reductions in scope for the project? So areas which, I would say maybe to say, all right, these are things that you have to do, that is essential. Here are some things that are perhaps optional. Here are some things which we would absolutely strongly recommend. But if you're really trying to pare it down, we might be able to get rid of this. So, other items. Okay.
If I may, Dr. Kruger, another item that I've written down that may be of value is inflation rates historically for energy projects,
Okay.
or also for utilities and labor rates that may be of value. We can
Okay.
kind of glean that information provided.
We'll get you a copy of that RFP as well.
Okay.
So that you can see how that was scored and the criteria.
Okay. If you can get that out to us as soon as possible, we'll put this on the regular agenda for, it's going to be in 2 weeks, right? It's our next meeting, so what? 17th. Okay. All right, next up, items 3 and 4, discussion and possible action about BG1s. Mr. Christie asked me to remove this from the agenda. Your comments?
Spoke with Greg Dunbar, KDE, had a conversation with him about doing this on 2 separate BG1s, which is what he recommended, the gym on one and the athletic fields on another. We discussed the cost, the increased cost, and he said he had not considered that, and it was not KDE's position to do anything that would cost the district more money, so he said that we would continue forward with 1 BG1. What I need to bring in the January meeting is a revised BG1. The funding issues that he was talking about was on the BG1 he has for the entire project, it's all funded through SFCC money, which he knows that we have had discussions about possibly considering a turf athletic field, which we cannot use those funds to pay for. So there has to be a line item with some cash money there to take care of that part if we desire to do an athletic field of a synthetic surface. Okay. So we'll make that correction, and then we'll come back with a combined BG1, and he said they would accept that and move forward with it. Now, we're still probably going to go before the Kentucky School Board Association. KDE will present that for us. They are in support of what we're asking to do, and they're supporting this, and they will present it. I will go with them. I'll be there with
How's
them.
that, KSBA or KBE?
KDE Facilities will present this to the Kentucky State Board for us.
If you understood what you just said, they're in favor of this.
They're in favor of this, and they will support it, and they will go in to make the argument that we be permitted a variance to go above the 40,000 square feet over that we are right now.
That's on the February meeting.
That's on the February meeting.
That's what, first Wednesday in February, I think?
I don't remember the exact date. Remember the dates on it? I think it was 12. But I did confirm that they were on there, and they were meeting today, and they were going over our criteria and things, and I talked with them for about an hour today about things that we want presented.
While they're looking at the turf cost, is there any chance they could do a closer smell test on that? Because I've heard some discussions that the broad number that was on the BG1 might be overly, it might be just simply high.
Well, and that's what the numbers on a preliminary BG1. I hope the $20 million for the entire project is way high. You know, we don't know that, and these are just placeholder numbers right now, and we won't know what those numbers are till you actually go to bid. And then once you go to bid, what you decide to do at that point, then we'll create a new revised BG1 with the exact figures on it, and that'll be resubmitted to KD for approval.
My thought being that if it's $1 million now, and the real number is $700,000, since that's a cash number, that might have a greater impact on the board members to say, oh, it's only 700, that's not as bad as.
Well, I don't think it would be a mix to, because as I understand it, you can use the other funds to prepare the field. You can do everything except buy the piece of carpet, per se, that goes on and pay for laying it. That's the only thing we would have to pay for, and it would be less than $1 million. And we can probably look at, that was just a number that we threw around, we can look and get more close estimated numbers and maybe reduce that to 700,000 or 800,000 instead of $1 million, you know. But there has to be a number in that local spot if we're considering turf. And that doesn't mean once you bid it that you have to do that. You can still have the option of going with a natural turf, and then you don't have to commit that money to it. But that's something that you can decide after you see the bids and what the costs associated to them are.
One other point I just mentioned to the board is that your contract with your construction manager was contingent upon approval of KD of your revised BG1 that's on your desk now. If you do get another revision, you may need to look at the technicalities of coming back to the board to look at that request for contract again. It's based on the new revision.
Not so technical, because the CM fee is based on the total project fee, right? So it's going to change.
So at this point, you do not have a contract with the construction manager.
Well, we had one, but it's a contingent.
It's contingent upon KD.
And that contract is on both portions. It's contingent, but it's on some gym and athletic field.
It's on the combined.
Yeah.
Project.
If it's approved by KD, it's a combined project, it's on that, yes. It's not independent of the foundation, it's not independent of the athletic project. It's contingent upon approval of combined BG1. Now, I'm not sure, I'll have to research a little what the issues with the revised BG1 there's any issues with that, based on the contract with the construction manager, we may have to come back and address that.
In my understanding, my conversation with Mr. Dunbar today, the only thing they're going to the state board is seeking approval for that 40,000 square foot overage. Everything else we're okay. We're ready to move forward with everything except that. They need someone to give permission above them to go 40,000. And that's the only thing that'll be in the, once, my expectation is once the KDE's state board approves it, it's going to be a real quick turnaround for Dunbar to sign off on it, and we'll get a.
The contract figures will change based on what you approved in the past.
Okay. All right, next up under the consent agenda is item number 5, acknowledge formation of the Budget Finance Committee. I'm going to ask to pull this off for a little bit of discussion. Ms. Ellis, I did a little bit of research, and actually, I know Fayette County had this for a period of time. Went ahead and looked back at their minutes because I was intrigued as to what a budget/finance committee would do and the role it would play in the district.
We actually have.
Right. It was pretty robust when Mr. Price was chair, and then it's like it's kind of fallen by the wayside. So, explain to me what you think that this would do, how positive would it be for the district, how would it change our role in the budgeting process?
I wanted to start this committee with the intention of being more transparent in the finances to the district stakeholders, whether that be the school members and the community stakeholders, just so that they know during the budget process, finances through the year, as I do the quarter reports, or we can turn that into monthly eventually if we get there, and the audit process, that through those processes, they're a part of the discussion of what's going on in the district at the moment. And it's not just at the board meetings that they're getting the little snippets of information after the fact of something that's been done. It's quarterly we meet and kind of discuss what's happening within the district.
Okay. Why do you think Fayette's effort petered out?
It's like getting a commission on the taxes too.
Okay.
I've had some personnel changes recently.
I just wondered, because, you know, they had, if you look back at their website, there's quarterly meetings for years, and then 2, and then 1, and that's kind of the
Do you know,
players met
with
with
the
a long
change in
time ago.
superintendents and kind of the tension between budgeting staff and the finance staff?
Right.
there's a lot.
Ironically, when all that was really hot and heavy and all over the papers, that group was meeting regularly, so. Okay.
Do you think that through forming this committee that eventually that we would cut out the consultant fee? Or is that something that we would consider?
I mean, that's a consideration that could be done. And as I get more comfortable in my role as the finance director in Clark County, I would be comfortable with that. He has been a very great value walking into a district that I knew nothing about. And him having worked with you all for several years, he has been an extreme help to me as the
But he's
district.
retiring, is he?
Yes.
That's what I was thinking.
If we don't renew his contract or he fades out of the picture, one of his more important items has been demographic data,
Yes.
which we use for planning, strategic planning, and budget planning. How would we replace that?
That would be a difficult item for me to replace.
Okay.
The demographic data of our community?
Yeah, our consultants' estimates of increases and decreases in the community has been very,
Yes,
very
very.
accurate. And I think, you know, from a SEEK standpoint, we've been able to get the SEEK dollars down pretty closely because we've got a good finger on the population trends. So,
And having his company involved in that side, in the SEEK, I mean, he was very much, in the beginning when the SEEK formula was developed, he was part of that at KDE.
Right.
So, I mean, he has the knowledge, and it is part of his OVEC company, that knowledge on that side of things. So that has been, the prediction of our revenues has been very strong.
He has a person that's working with him every meeting. He's working with someone now, so he may retire, there's gonna be someone else there, so it doesn't necessarily mean that they're gonna be gone, but he does have a lot of experience.
I know when we did the master plan for the parks years ago, we used some entity called the Kentucky Data
Yeah,
Center.
that's where he gets that information, that's where he gets his information from.
Ron Crouch.
Yep, there you go.
Yep.
What happens with the output from this committee? Does it come to the board for approval, or how does this fit into the
My
process?
intentions of the committee was more of an oversight to share transparency. It wasn't necessarily for decision-making purposes. That would still lie with the superintendent and the cabinet, and then final approval by the board members, just as it's been presented at the moment. And then, like I said, meetings would be quarterly, and it's more of a discussion group on the pertinent topics during that quarter to address any concerns that we might have before we get to a board meeting with that item.
What about the size of the committee?
It
How is
is-
that determined?
I took a snapshot of how Fayette County has formed their committee. The extra members of this committee versus Fayette County's is I included our cabinet members because we are very much a team here at Clark County, that we make decisions together during cabinet. And I felt that it was best if all cabinet members were on there. The nominated members are more structured from Fayette County's structure of their budget committee, and those would be nominated by those particular categories. So for example, with you all, it would be you would decide among you which two board members, based on who wanted to be nominated, chose nomination, who would be on it, and the same with each of the other parties. So the extra members that make it a little bit larger committee is that I included all of cabinet, because I just felt for our district, that was a better option for us. But we do know that not everybody shows up at every meeting. I mean, we have a 17-member committee, but we could have 8 people accordingly that show up. I mean, it's just depending on the schedule of how the committee sets the dates that we would meet. It was available.
When will these meetings be?
I want to have them quarterly at the minimum.
But I mean,
And
like
it would-
during the day or?
And that's the discussion. I would set the first one as a night meeting as the chairperson of the committee, and then as the committee, we would decide from that point forward what times we would meet as a group.
Do you foresee any changes that we need to adopt to our policy and procedure manual as a result of having this?
As a result of forming the committee?
Right.
Not as a result of forming it. I feel like that's a discussion that could be had in committee, is finance policies that we could update. But as far as changing our current policy to form the committee, I don't see any.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions, Ms. Ellis?
Do you need to put it on the January meeting if this gets approved? We need to nominate.
I was going to ask for approval tonight, so.
No, I mean, the nomination board.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right now, what would be on the agenda is the approval of the concept of this,
Right. That's for discussion.
not to, not.
Right,
particular
that's what I was
representative.
asking, is he gonna put it on January's meeting, or is this something?
If you approve the committee formation, we'll have it on the January meeting to select 2 board members. You all
But
need to
approval
think about it.
tonight sets all this other stuff in motion, correct me if I'm wrong. All right. Other discussion? Judy, can you share with us how the previous budget committee, how that worked?
Scott and I were both on it,
Okay.
at least part of the time, but we had it, 2000, when did Dr. Musgrove come? It was during his tenure for about 3 years, and during 2006, and then the first year of Dr. Ferris's term. And it was a much smaller group though, as I recall. And some of it, we got into too many details. You know, I mean, I tend to be a detailed person. This was too many details. I mean, we were sitting and spending several minutes, if not hours, on things that should have been left up to the schools. You know, copiers.
That's what I don't want to get into.
Right. It was-
Day-to-day operations,
Yes.
that's not.
And some of that, yeah, that was not.
That is not my intention of this committee
No.
at all.
Yeah, that was, I think I was just on it for 1 year, and it was really more focused on developing the budget, and it was,
Yes.
we got into the details, I mean, we would
Yes.
go over everything. I think yours is more of a, let's get comments and different viewpoints from the public. Hopefully also spread information out there too, I think
Yes.
would be a useful.
I want it to be transparent to the community that some things I've heard as the new director is sometimes things aren't shared, and I just want to make sure that the correct parties are finding out and it's getting shared among the entire district and community, and not maybe just
held in locally.
Okay, so we were more of a budget committee rather than a budget and finance committee.
All right. Okay, any other discussion? If not, motion is in order to acknowledge the formation of a budget finance committee and to allow Ms. Ellis to set the wheels in motion.
Make that motion.
Motion by Ms. Ritchie,
Second.
second by Ms. Hicks. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Motion is in order to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Motion by Ms. Ritchie,
Oh, I'll second.
second by Mr. Faisal. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. We're adjourned at 7:59 PM. Plenty of time for schedule.
It's gonna be tough on those 7:30 games.
Yeah, it's not doable at 7:30 here, so. Also, the meeting's adjourned, but everybody's got, he sent out requests for a school board attorney. So we'll need to set a time and